and we were willing to do what was asked of us. So I think they just wanted to make an example of us, and it was kind of a mob rule. Everybody there. I mean, we're just two people that visit once in a blue moon in this case, right? But what about everybody else that was there? Like they're watching this. I just felt like we were being made an example of.
Well, folks, you might recall our interview with the sister of Stephanie Warner. Stephanie Warner was someone who checked into Toronto General Hospital back in 2020, got into a physical altercation with security guards. They took exemption to the fact that she wasn't wearing her mask properly, and in the aftermath, Stephanie Warner would pass away.
You are sending a message that this is okay. You're sending a message to, the other security guards who work at the University Health Network, which is the largest health network in the country. This is okay. We will stand by you. You can crush somebody to death and we will turn a blind eye. And after the fact, we're going to continue to protect you.
Now, just in case you thought this was a one-off, well, we received word that another disturbing event happened at a Toronto hospital, that being Sunnybrook Hospital, in which a woman went to visit her mother-in-law and ended up inexplicably being beaten up by hospital security. It's absolutely baffling. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Yun Ping Lung. She goes by the nickname YP. And YP, as I said earlier this month, you went to Sunnybrook Hospital in North Toronto. You went with your husband to visit your mother-in-law. And then something went sideways with the security guards there. What exactly happened, my friend?
Well, my husband and I were in the second cup lineup at the cafeteria inside of Sunnybrook Hospital, and an administrator turned around and said that we weren't wearing masks. And she asked me if I would wear a mask, and I'm like, I can't because I'm allergic. And she says, well, the masks are hypogenic. And I'm like, well, there's the little fibers and they get up there and then, you get sick. And so she said, well, I can get you a shield. And I'm like, I have a shield upstairs at my mother-in-law's room. And then she turned to my husband, who also didn't happen to be wearing a mask, and asked if he had a shield. And he's like, no, I don't. And she said, okay, I'll get a shield for you. But then I questioned her about the validity of using a mask when it doesn't really protect against viruses, because of the nature of the size of the virus. And she got affronted, and then she's like, well, if you don't put on, these are hospital policies, and you're on private property, and if you don't follow these rules, I'm gonna have to call a security guard. And her friend who was standing next to her said, well, I already called the security guard. And pretty well 5 minutes later, security shows up, surrounds us, 5 security guards. And they're like, well, you guys have to put on a mask. And so after some talking and some exchange of differences of opinion, my husband agreed to go get a mask or go get a shield. So the head security guard, I guess that's what you would call him, he escorted my husband to get a shield. He came back with a shield. And then I volunteered. I'm like, well, I can go upstairs and get my shield. And the head security guards were like, no, you stay in place. He wanted my husband to go upstairs and get the shield and to bring it back to me. And I asked several times and they said, no, you stay in place. And my husband starts going, well, I don't understand where these policies are coming from. Can you give me a name? And at that, the security guard was like, you don't need to know a name. It's not required. You just need to go upstairs and get your mask for your wife. And when my husband questioned a little further, he was like, okay, we're taking these guys down. Are we okay with that? And he turns to his one of the girls' security guards and asks if what she felt, and she kind of nodded in agreement. And then they proceeded to cuff us. And next thing I know, I'm down and they're trying to cuff me. And I feel like I've done nothing wrong. So I'm a little resistant and I'm down on the ground. And basically they applied George Floyd style force on us. A guy kneed me on the neck, and other people were on top of me, and they cuffed me, and they did it really tight, and they banged my head a few times on the floor, and I had it afterwards I had this huge egg-like swollen area on my cheek and on some of my forehead. I think you might still be able to see that I have a little bit of the black eye here.
No,
So
you sent along some of the pics of what happened to you. It looked brutal, YP. Let me just get this straight. You weren't looking to cause trouble. As a matter of fact, you agreed to their demand. You were acquiescing to what they said about wearing that shield. You were going to go up and get the shield.
yeah.
It seems to me that the security guards were just really upset for inexplicable reasons that you were asking them some questions. Do I have this story right? And their response was to actually handcuff you like you were a common criminal and then do that George Floyd style takedown. I mean, I don't get this, YP. Why would they go to DEFCON 4 in a blink of an eyelash?
You know what? I can only think that we were being made an example of because we were agreeable. Like I was reading a book on being a yogi and my husband had a shield on. So it wasn't like we were, and we were not angry, we were not upset, and we were willing to do what was asked of us. So I think they just wanted to make an example of us. And it was kind of a mob rule. Everybody there, I mean, we're just two people that visit once in a blue moon in this case, right? But what about everybody else that was there, like they're watching this. I just felt like we were being made an example of, essentially.
And YP, to add insult to injury, the police were called, except it wasn't you and your husband calling the police. It was the security that called the police. How did that interaction with the Toronto police officers pan out?
Well, I didn't feel like I was at fault. And this is the most violence I've ever experienced in my adult life. So for me, it's a big deal. I was a little stressed out. And so I didn't, so, what happened was they charged us and we didn't give them our ID. And so they searched my body and they took the ID, and they searched my purse and they took the ID. And I was like, this is an illegal search and seizure. You're legally searching through my body and you're legally searching at my property without my permission. And the female police officer was like, well, it's not illegal. You're being charged. And I'm like, what am I being charged with? And then the male police officer handed me this ticket that says trespassing. I'm like, how can I be charged with trespassing when the last instruction I was given was to stay in place, not to leave the hospital, and not to wear a shield, because I was volunteering to wear a shield. So I was told to stay in place, and now I'm getting this trespassing ticket. And I said to the police officer, listen, if you're not here, like the last thing I was told was to stay in place. If you're not here to uphold the law, what are you doing? And I looked every security guard in the face. There was 5 of them. And I said, the last thing you told me to do was to stay in place. So I couldn't win. And the police was not really interested in a true account of what happened. They were just siding with the security guards who have unfettered power.
And YP, I think there's a very important point. As you said, the security guards stated stay in place. Well, you can't stay in place and leave the premises. It's a catch-22. And I think you told me off air when you asked all the security guards, admit it, that was the last thing you said. Suddenly they did the Sergeant Schultz routine and just clammed up. They wouldn't say anything. So kind of odd that they're so belligerent to you prior to the assault and so vocal. And then in the face of law enforcement, real law enforcement, they clam up about giving you that order, an order you couldn't comply with if you were to leave the premises. I mean, it is absolutely baffling. Now, you've reached out to the hospital. I can tell you, YP, we have too. We haven't heard back from their media relations department, nor do I expect to, unfortunately. What has the hospital told you?
Well, I basically sent that night, I sent an email to both the vice president and the president of Sunnybrook Hospital. And I said, look, this is what happened to me. And you know what? If nothing gets done about this, I have no choice but to look at what I could do from a liability perspective, right? So they sent that information to, I think, this inpatient ombudsman person. And then they sent this letter saying, oh, we'll get back to you. But nobody has gotten back to me since. So
much like the Stephanie Warner case, which really ended tragically in the death of that lady. a hospital, one would think, is a place where you go to get better. I mean, I know you weren't checking yourself in at the hospital as a patient. You were visiting your mother-in-law who was in hospital. But some of the things you mentioned, to the person you had the original verbal altercation with, well, it's true. I mean, these masks, they are by definition non-medical masks. Mask experts say these don't work. If it was a surgeon doing an operation, he wouldn't be wearing this sort of a mask. And also the idea of private property. Yeah, I guess technically Sunnybrook Hospital, any hospital is private property, but we have a publicly funded healthcare system. We pay for the hospitals in this province. In fact, we have no other choice but to do so. So I guess what I'm getting at is that in a sense, you're kind of a stakeholder, given that you're a taxpayer. Where will it go from here? I know with Stephanie Warner, her sister, Denise Warner-Smith, she recently launched a $16 million lawsuit. Are you thinking about suing the hospital, suing the security guards for the beating that you endured?
Well, so I reached out to a lot of lawyers, and I haven't received anything positive. So I wouldn't mind looking for a lawyer if there's a lawyer out there who would represent me. But I'm also, to be honest, I'm also not made out of money. I have a modest lifestyle. So, modest lifestyle. So I think if there's somebody out there willing to help, I have reached out to the same lawyer that represented Stephanie Warner, because my friend sent me that contact info, but I haven't heard from him yet. So I don't know. I think it's out there. I'm putting it out there, but we'll see. It has to be the right lawyer with the right, possibilities, right? So as it stands, I guess my main thing is I would like it for people to know that this is what the security guard at hospitals have come to. They're no longer obeying the law. And I'm not sure the police is out there to protect us. I feel like there are high monetary stakes involved. And like pharmaceutical companies have a lot to benefit from these vaccines. And I think it's getting in the way of justice and human rights. So,
no, I think you're right, YP. And, in the Stephanie Warner case, again, these security guards not only did they not face any kind of criminal justice penalty, they all got their jobs back. They are still on duty there. And I think in addition to the tragedy of her life being lost, this is a miscarriage of justice. I don't understand the fisticuffs that ensue just when there's a verbal dispute, if you will, especially when you were prepared to cooperate. You were going to go back up to your mother-in-law's room, get the face shield. It's absolutely inexplicable. Well, YP, I hope you have luck finding a lawyer. Last word goes to you, my friend.
Well, I feel like what happened to Steph, I feel very lucky. I think with God's grace, I was not that badly hurt, and I really feel for Stephanie Warner. I feel like, that shouldn't happen in Canada. You shouldn't die because your mask is sitting at your chin. Like, I don't care what anybody says. And somebody who happens to be alone in a wheelchair and having respiratory problems to be put in a situation where the cameras happen to be turned, and for her to die after that incident, we all have to stand up. That's not right.
Indeed, YP, and what you're referring to, in case people don't know the story, there was a security guard, I guess, in the control center who deliberately moved the camera away once the physicality started. Maybe that's a cautionary tale for you, that you should get in touch with the hospital and say, this was surely caught on your security footage. You better preserve that, because I would imagine that would be evidence in your favor if and when you do go ahead, YP, with some legal action. YP, I hope you are on the mend with those cuts and bruises you received, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your time. God bless you.
You too. Thank you. Hey folks, I know you love it when Rebel News brings you the other side of the story, but it comes at a cost. We don't receive a single nickel of government funding from this Trudeau regime, nor would we accept it if offered. So if you can, please go to rebelinvestigates.com. That's rebelinvestigates.com. And if you're able to, kindly make a donation. My thanks in advance.